This last weekend, I was checking out the New World Open Beta, Amazon Studios' flagship gaming title, and I'm sure many of you tried it out as well. I had not gone out of my way to read too much about the game beforehand, as I wanted to experience it myself without other influences. But I went in expecting an MMO, and it's certainly not my first. I've played PSO, EverQuest, Anarchy Online, Dark Age of Camelot, FF11, SWG, The Old Republic, EVE Online, Lineage 2, EverQuest 2, World of Warcraft, City of Heroes, Guild Wars 1 and 2, Matrix Online, Star Trek Online, and the list just goes on from there. And I didn't realise how many I'd actually played until I sat and thought about it. And well, Amazon did not disappoint. They have indeed created an MMO. However, it does enough differently to have piqued my interest. And the crafting and PvP systems in particular impressed me compared to some other titles on the market. So let's talk New World. First with a very brief story overview, then we'll talk about the game and its gameplay in sections covering PvE, PvP, combat skills, crafting, and the in-game store, and its microtransactions, the elephant in the room, shall we say. And then we'll talk about graphics, sound, and finally a quick summary. And being a beta, it's not without its bugs, and I will cover a few of these that I encountered, because we're only a few weeks away from release, and I feel like some of these shouldn't be there anymore. So hopefully they're watching and we'll make sure these are squished for the 28th. So onto the story and a quick overview. The game is set in the mid-17th century on a fictional island of Eternum, where you become stranded. The island has veins of Azoth, which is a mineral which both empowers and corrupts, and you then go on to defeat this corruption. It is also where the game's magical element comes from, and allows for your standard MMO fantasy style enemies such as zombies and living skeletons. Now let's start by talking about the game and its PvE aspects. MMO games have a very standard quest formula for PvE, and New World does not stray too far from this. Plenty of standard go here, kill this, or fetch this quests right from the start. And it makes a good effort to integrate this into the story, which you can follow if you so wish, though it's certainly not forced and you can just skip through all the dialogue. You don't pick a class at the start, all skills are based on weapons and your mastery or use of them. You can choose from bows, muskets, fire staves, life staves, ice gauntlets, swords, shields, spears, rapiers, warhammers, hatchets, and great axes. You can also change at any point, though certain attributes give bonuses to particular weapons, but again these attributes can be changed, but that makes up your class. And to further this, there are light, medium, and heavy armor sets, light giving a better dodge distance, medium offering lesser dodge but more protection, and heavy which offers the most protection but very limited dodge. And all of these items offer a gear score which advise you of their overall quality. And that quality score also relates heavily to crafting, but we'll talk about that later. But in essence, you kind of build your own class by the choice of weapons, secondary weapons, and also the armor set you're wearing. As I noted, you can chop and change and respec as you so wish. That includes your attributes and also your weapon skills. But back to questing. All the quest giving NPCs I met were fully voiced, which did impress me, and as you progress through what I would consider the tutorial missions, it pushes you to visit other towns and areas, and I can only assume this is to encourage you to pick up quests there too. Available quests appear on the map as a gold diamond, so it's worth checking the map every so often to see if you're missing anything. When you leave the initial starting area and you go to your first town, it's also worth checking at that point, because one of the resource gathering quests can be easily missed in certain starting areas. For example, I missed the one that I was in. As you complete quests in each area, you are given points to spend on the map screen to give boosts to XP in that area, resource gathering percentage, etc, etc. There are 4 starting areas with a main town on each server: First Light, Windswood, Monarch's Bluff, and Everfall. For the likely influx of players, this is not a bad thing, but a lot of land is given up to those starting areas. The nice thing is, however, if you so wish, you can move to a different one to play with your friends, because at the start you're just placed in one at random. There were certainly times when you were waiting your turn with other people to kill one of the boss mobs early in the open beta, even with the 4 starting areas. It did however settle down more after the initial mad rush. And that leads me on nicely to mob spawn times. I'm not sure how they are being regulated, but it could do with being improved. There were times when it was simply too slow for the number of people waiting to kill things, and there were other times when you were the only person in the area and there were so many mobs spawning you couldn't cope. I imagine it's not an easy thing to get right, but there is certainly room for improvement. Of course, if you die, unlike some other games which have fairly significant penalties, all you do here is lose some durability on your items, otherwise you just spawn at a spawn point which you have set, and you will get a choice of either the inn which you have selected as your main spawn, the nearest town, or a player-paced camp which either you have built on your own, or you have come across a pre-built one and selected it. And as there are no mounts, building camps can save you a significant run back to your combat area. Though it's not just about standard quests, there are also expeditions, also known as dungeons in other games. These seem to start around level 25, which sort of makes sense to me as the tutorial basically runs until you hit around level 20. And I think that's how the game is set up. Until level 20, you can respec your character's attributes for free, and after that it costs gold. As for the weapons, after mastery level 10, you have to start paying Azoth to respec points. So early game, you can allow yourself to fully explore all specs to find one that you like. And a quick note on Azoth, since we've mentioned it again, it's a resource which is quite important in the game and is used in a variety of circumstances. Respecing your weapons, fast travel, and also part of crafting, which again we will talk about later. One of the really nice things in this game is that PvP is totally optional. You can take part in the factions without ever flagging for PvP. They have PvE quests, so you can still get all the faction loot and associated benefits, but continue on your journey as a purely PvE experience, never getting involved in the player politics. There is certainly more to PvE, including invasions, which are part of the endgame content. These are for up to 50 players, and they are a raid meets a base defense game mode, where you have to defend against waves of enemies, which get increasingly difficult to the point you're probably going to lose. But I can't really cover everything about PvE in one video, or we will be here for hours, so I feel I've covered the salient or most important points there. Very similar to other MMO games, though combat is certainly different, and again I'll be talking about that in detail at the end of the PvP section. Let's move on to PvP. There are 3 factions in the game. The Covenant, your religious-based faction, the Marauders, a warfare and aggressive-based faction, and finally the Syndicate, who are searching for the scientific truth. Each faction has its own store where you can buy specific loot, with faction points or gold, including full armor sets, weapons, and various accessories, and also certain items that you will use in crafting. Now, the faction points can be earned via PvE quests, or by quests where you need to be flagged for PvP, and obviously finally by competing in PvP and killing enemy players. PvP can only be enabled in towns considered a sanctuary, and no combat can occur there. When you leave, you will get a lovely little timer warning you that you will soon become vulnerable to other players. One issue with PvP is that there is currently no level bracket limitations. So a level 10 player can be decimated by a level 30 plus player in a couple of hits. I also found that when engaging in PvP, I did not always seem to get XP and faction points, but could not work out why. It's possibly because only the person to get the last hit gets the points, but I'm honestly not sure, and I struggled to find any details online about that. Outside of your small scale open world PvP, there is also territory control in the game. Completing faction missions in a territory increases that faction's influence, and you can control the fort in that area, and other factions can attack it to take over the fort, and that gives additional territorial and global bonuses to that faction. Wars can also be declared and result in points that can be spent to repair or upgrade the fort, including wall-mounted weapons. The vast majority of the time, forts are freely open to be attacked. However, there will be brief periods before and after wars and invasions where they are unavailable to be accessed. Players in factions can also set up companies, which are basically guilds. They can then purchase one of the towns. They will gain from that the tax revenue, and then get control of things like the crafting stations and can choose which ones get upgraded, which then benefits all players as they are able to craft higher tier items. Also, there are other resource carts which unlock for members of the same faction that control the territory, giving those members an extra little bonus regardless of whether they get involved in PvP or not. They've also added some endgame PvP modes, such as Outpost Rush mode, which is an endgame mode where both PvE and PvP players can play together, as it involves gathering resources, building a base, and claiming outposts, as well as the PvP element. And their intent is to continue expanding and improving the PvP endgame options by adding new game modes as time goes by. Obviously, there were also the previously mentioned PvP wars, and these can involve up to 50 players from each side. Now, as mentioned, I've played plenty of MMOs, and most of them have a PvP element. Some games obviously do it better than others. And in the case of New World, I was really impressed with the PvP combat, and more than anything else, it was because of the combat system they have in place in the game. So let's talk about that next. Unlike most MMOs which are target lock based, New World has a slightly more skill-based system. This is more like a third-person shooter. You have to aim ranged weapons. You have to aim your character in the direction you want to attack with a melee weapon. Weapon skills, especially magic ones, have to be targeted in an area on the ground, and you can't just stand still and take damage, even against enemies your level. While at 1v1 most of the time you can survive a fair few hits, once there is a group of them you'll start to lose health fast. Blocking and dodging are important. These are user-based skills and timing-based, so it's about practice. You can likely survive most PvE situations with minimal use of these, but PvP will be a different story. Honestly, when it comes to PvE, pretty much anything goes. You can wield any weapons you like, any combination of that. Though, when finding random groups for dungeons etc, you might want to be more focused for a usual setup such as a tank, DPS or healer. However, it's basically about what you enjoy playing, and to some extent you can get away with that in PvP. But if you want to be really competitive in PvP, there are going to be particular weapons and skill choices that outperform others, and I fully expect there will be a constant flavour of the month setup, and the game will undergo constant rebalances as a result. During the open beta, for example, I saw a lot of muskets and rapiers being used for PvP. Some people opting for warhammers due to their damage output and ability to stun. Magical weapons were in limited use, but I gave them a good go in PvP, and generally as long as I stayed at range I felt I was making a difference. Though if it got up close and personal I switched to my secondary, which was a sword and shield, which probably isn't the most favoured for PvP either. Ice gauntlets were certainly the most favoured of the magical weapons when it came to PvP, other than those who were standing back and healing with life staff. But PvP combat has a significant element of player skill attached. I watched a level 31 player withstand assaults from 10 plus people with careful use of healing potions etc. He was obviously quite experienced at the game. In terms of the weapons, you slowly level them up both in PvE and PvP, gaining mastery points. Each point can be spent on a skill or other bonus within the skill tree. Up to and including mastery level 10, for each weapon you can freely respec and try out new things. After that it will cost you Azoth per skill point you want to retract. You can then pick skills and extras from each tree, and you can really just fit the entire thing to your playstyle, or indeed you could follow a guide to have the best PvP setup available. I'm not convinced by the weapon balancing in PvP or PvE as yet. I think it will need ongoing work. There was a significant advantage to using melee weapons both in damage output and defense compared to, say, trying to play as the equivalent of a fire mage in this game. Muskets were the ranged weapon of choice as they simply outrange the competition by a country mile. Possible balance issues aside, the combat was honestly a lot of fun and really impressed me. They really tried to do something a bit different here, and in my mind it really does work, though there will be that need for a constant rebalance in my mind. It will not be something that everyone likes, but I feel that even in terms of the PvE it was balanced in such a way that you did not need to be some expert at blocking and dodging to play the game well. This is no Dark Souls. It is much more forgiving than that game. Crafting was something else that quite impressed me about New World, and it's something that everybody can get involved in, from the resource gathering all the way up to crafting special items and endgame legendaries. The game is set up from the outset to encourage players to engage with this aspect of the game, and your first impressions may be that it looks fairly simplistic and grindy as these things are in many MMOs. However, just under the surface is a much more detailed and complex crafting system that it takes a few hours in game to really start to appreciate. Let's start with resource gathering. As with many MMOs, you level up each gathering skill, giving access to higher tier resources and allowing them to appear on your radar, for example. You also have the chance to get bonus special resources each time you complete a gathering action, such as skinning an animal or mining an ore vein. Leveling up crafting also gives character XP, so there is the first incentive to get involved with this. When you kill something, if you then skin it, you get extra XP. You're going to level faster. There are also various quests you can take in the towns to aid them in resource collection. And if you don't want to craft, you can always sell your excess resources on the auction house to buy other items, or maybe even buy your first house. I have, however, noted that there is a significant issue with skinning in the game. There is no grace period where a dead animal belongs to you personally, so anyone can run up and skin it before you have chance, which really sucks if you are skinning it as part of your quest, and I guess that needs to be looked into. A 30-second timer or something like that would be fantastic to allow you to just, skin the animals you've killed. In terms of gathering as a whole, it did feel a little bit grindy leveling it up at times. However, there were more than enough resources that I could have leveled it up in passing as I went about doing other quests. I chose to level it up deliberately to see how far I could get with it. Crafting itself is a little bit more in depth than the gathering. At first glance, it seems like for most items you get a set recipe, and that's the items you craft with. However, on closer inspection, these resource boxes are actually drop-down boxes where you can select a variety of resources. The higher the quality and rarity of the replacement ingredient, the higher the overall gear score will be on the item. And as a result, the higher the weapon damage or the higher the armor rating. Then at the other side of the same window, you can add a specific rare item to dictate what bonus attributes the item will have, and then further add an amount of Azoth to guarantee a rare item with extra bonuses. For example, rare item drop chance, extra weapon damage, the list goes on, and it's not just on normal weapons and armor, it also applies to the gathering tools you can build. And as your level of crafting goes up and the tiers get higher, the options become wider still. Most items in the game have a level cap which you need to hit before you can use them. Because of the way the crafting works and increasing gear score with these additional items, it doesn't actually put the level requirement of the item up. So when you're crafting, you can actually make better items than would otherwise be available for your level. And other than all your items and accessories, you can also craft furniture for your home. And the other important aspect of crafting is food, which grants extra stackable bonuses to your character, from simple healing and mana bonuses to improved attributes and boosting other crafting skills. Again, you can alter the items in the recipes here, which will not give additional bonuses, but means you can use up resources of your choice rather than be forced to use all your best meat that you might need for a different recipe. Now, what I will say is that no matter what crafting you're doing, it needs to be leveled, as with most games it's going to be a little bit grindy at times. However, the compromise reached here is that firstly you can create entire stacks of items instantly without having to wait for each one to complete. And it gives the option to salvage items instantly rather than have to do it all one at a time after the fact, especially handy if you're just leveling up. That's also a nice feature when you are crafting items with random bonuses, as you might be making a few before you get the bonus you want. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. As with so many games these days, this one will have an in-game store in which you can spend your real hard-earned cash for in-game items. After an initial backlash, the team and Amazon have stated the store will only include cosmetics at launch. However, they think there is room for quality of life items in the future without it crossing into pay-to-win territory. These being things such as additional storage, which would also be available in the game, but they are going along the lines of paying for convenience for those who do not have time to achieve these things from gameplay. And I have very mixed feelings about that, because there's always the fear that developers can make things very difficult to achieve in the game to encourage people to pay for that convenience. Amazon did respond to the initial complaints and removed the planned XP boost from the store. However, they have not explicitly stated they won't make a return. I think when you're talking about paying for convenience, it's very hard to find a place to draw the line. I think that the line should definitely be drawn when it starts to influence game design. But when it comes to New World, time will tell. I'm honestly not sure where they're going to draw the line and where we're going to end up. However, I am pleased to see they have at least listened to people's concerns so far. Graphically, the game is very pretty and runs exceptionally well. Some textures are a bit flat at times and the character creation options are limited. I suspect this is to ensure it runs well on more systems, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. There are certainly some stunning vistas to look at throughout the game with its day and night cycle, and the water in particular looks very nice. Though there is no swimming, which is kind of frustrating. You just kind of walk along the river or lake bed, but that's another matter entirely. Then there are a few issues with getting stuck on rocks and other items and bouncing around on the spot, which are basically clipping issues. I actually managed to recreate this a few times while mining, for example. Sound again is a good area for this game. It has some quality music to play along to, and very obvious sound cues when you're about to be attacked or are entering a dangerous area, which is always welcome. I also like the fact they have fully voice acted most of the quest characters. However, the game has a major and frequent sound bug, where some of the sound channels start to cut out or cut out completely. Weirdly, opening the inventory fixes this for some reason, but a lot of players seem to be getting it, and with 2 weeks to go before release, I really hope they get that fixed, as it seems a fairly major thing to overlook. In summary, I don't have the time that I once did to play most MMOs, and that is often a deciding factor on if I'm going to pick one up. In the case of New World, the time commitment was not too unreasonable, though if you want to do everything including gathering and crafting, then the time needs will increase significantly. And I've got to be honest, personally I wouldn't really want to miss out on the crafting here because it is quite a good system. And the fact they don't force crafting time for each individual item means it really reduces the amount of time you need to spend on these activities, and I was pretty thankful for that in the beta. PvP really impressed me, along with the style of combat. I only reached level 16 during the beta due to other time commitments on the weekend, but on the last night I joined others on the server for battles over a fort, and it was a lot of fun. I was not useless at this level, and even versus people in their 20s I was doing damage, especially with my preference to stand back and do damage from a range either with a musket or my preference of using the magical weapons. Though I did get stuck in with my sword from time to time and it was a lot of fun. I also like the fact there is no significant death penalty and it makes PvP so much more approachable. Though it remains the case that part of me wishes there were some more significant level limits on PvP engagement to stop lower level players being bullied by the top dogs. I do believe that this was changed during the beta, and previously there were more limits in place. However, all of that aside, something that New World gets right is the fact that everything is optional. You could concentrate on leveling and do the crafting stuff later, you could never touch PvP content and focus purely on crafting, and let others gather resources for you. How viable that is remains to be seen, but you could technically do it. I mean, it's not to the level of Star Wars Galaxies, but I doubt many games will ever reach its levels of non-combatant class options. Can I recommend New World? The answer is yes. While it feels a little rough around the edges and has some bugs that need to be squashed, hopefully before release, the product as a whole was really enjoyable. The skill-based combat will be the decider for a lot of people, and it won't be for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. The reality is there is a lot more to the game than I could cover in this video, otherwise we'd be here for hours. However, I think I've got the main points down, but please feel free to discuss other things below, as it's really interesting to learn more about the game, as there's plenty I still don't know. Now, New World releases on the 28th of September at a price of £35, $40 and €40, for the standard edition at least. It has no ongoing monthly fee, which I really think suits the kind of content it's pushing. It's Amazon's flagship title. I'm expecting a lot of ongoing support from this company, and it has very deep pockets with the intent to impress. Let's just see if that desire to impress can outpace the desire to put in nastier microtransactions. Thanks very much for watching. Please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more game reviews and related videos. I hope everyone has a great week.